Hi, welcome to CLACCA ULC. My name is Mr. Rev Comrade Rowley, and this is our weekly Sunday home group Bible studies. I'm just going to edit the title. Oh, so apologies. Cool. So essentially what we do each week in this session is we look at the sexuality and gender liberation hermeneutics of the Bible. And this week we're looking at the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, Genesis 19 specifically. So as we know, the book of Genesis was written sometime between 850 BCE and 550 BCE. We suspect Moses wrote the five books, Genesis being one of them. That's the second thing that's important to remember. The other thing that is also important to remember is that it's very much when we talk about the origins and history of Israel, we're talking about the history behind the text. So we're not intended to take the book of Genesis literally. So that's the first important thing to note. The other thing that is also important to note is that in relation to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, generally speaking, this book has been always been misinterpreted. So it's important to understand that. I'm just gonna see if I can stop that flashing, because I realize that's probably annoying for people. Cool. Okay, that seems to have stopped it. Apologies for the technical hiccup there. So, as I was saying, this session is very much about Genesis 19, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, it's important not to take this text literally, and in relation to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, it's nothing. Absolutely, it's not about sexuality and gender at all, or at all. It's there is nothing. There is nowhere in the text does it define homosexuality or transgender in any way, shape, or form. Essentially, the name of Sodom and Gomorrah, as we highlighted last week, is the name of two cities, um, cities, and we will address the real sin of Sodom and Gomorrah. No, Gomorrah. More, but I can assure you I have studied this text for about 43 years, and I can tell you there is no description from the decades of research that I've done on this text. This text, it's not about homosexuality. It's not about it's not about it's not about it's not about condemning transgender people. It's not about condemning LGBTIQ people. People like regardless of what you have been led to believe, led to being taught, etc. From over 4 decades of over 40 years of research I've done on this text and I've studied this text extensively. In no way, shape, or form in the original Hebrew translation, there is absolutely the sexuality and gender is not defined in this particular text. So that's the first thing that's important to remember. Within the text is broken up into three sections. So the first part is the angel's investigation. Now, the reason why the angel's investigation takes place first is because the angel is trying to get to the bottom of what the real sin is in this particular text. At no point in any way, shape, or form, the angel is not interested in the sexuality or gender. Gender. The angel is not interested in condemning the sexuality and gender of anybody. Likewise, in relation to Lot and the characters in the story, there's nobody within the text from what I can see. They are not interested in condemning the sexuality and gender of anybody. That's not uh, the reason why God sends an angel into you is because before the destruction begins of Sodom and Gomorrah, God wants to investigate what is the sin here before doing anything. And I think that is an important piece of advice to remember. Remember, before you go and condemning anybody in any way, shape, or form, your first task is to go and investigate the matter. Matter, just as this angel has intended to do. So essentially, what the angel does as part of God's investigation into the matter is essentially is what the angel is assessing is first and foremost the hospitality mentality, and so Lot demonstrates hospitality by inviting the angels in and offers them hospitality in terms of helping them to in terms of helping them to clean up and helping them to clean their feet, as well as they made as well as offering them food to eat, as well as but more importantly, now there's an important reason in order for the angels to make a full assessment as to what the real sin is going on. The angels accept Lot's hospitality to stay overnight. Um, now, before they had a chance to, before the angels had even before the angels and Lot and everybody had a chance to rest. rest, um, they suddenly discovered that the house was surrounded by people both young and old. Old, old, and here's where the sin starts. And if you look at the particular text where says um, it says here, first and foremost, the first task I said, no, we will spend the night in the square. Is the square. It's the square. So essentially, initially, they were a little bit hesitant in terms of spending the night at Lot's address. But they urged them to, he urged the angels to stay in his house and he made them a feast, and then before they laid down. And when it talks about in Genesis 19:4, before they laid down, that is referring to before they went to sleep. Sleep. There's no intent or there's no intention of sex act. Lay down in this particular context means before they went to sleep. Sleep. And so before they went to sleep, both the people of the city, both young and old, all the people surrounded the house, and they called to Lot, "Where are the people who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we may know them." And so it's important to remember, see here it says in Genesis 19:5, the text specifically says, "Bring them out to us so that we may know them." Know them. Again, knowing people does not imply uh, um, it doesn't necessarily specify what the it doesn't specify a homosexuality act. It doesn't specify an allosexuality the act in any way, shape, or form. In the next part, Lot says, Lot went out of the door to the people and shut the door after them and said, I beg you, who do not act wickedly. Look, I have two daughters. Now, this is where the sin, the first sin, that we've uh, covered, is a lack of hospitality. Lack of hospitality. So that's sin number one. Hospitality. Now, the reason why lack of hospitality is sin number one is because they have a problem with the fact that um, Lot has invited the angels into Lot's house for the night. Um, Essentially, and this particular text, it would equally apply to regardless of what the sexuality or gender of the particular person the particular angel that Lot has invited into their house. House. And Lot says, to them when he goes outside and says, "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Wickedly. Look, I have two daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you." And Do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under my shelter, under the shelter of my roof. But they replied, stand back. And they said, this fellow came here as an alien. Alien. So notice specifically it uses the term alien. Alien, which means which means foreigner, refugee, etc. etc. So the issue that they have, as it states in this particular text in Genesis 19:9, but they replied, stand back. And they said, this fellow came here as an alien and he would play the judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. So the issue that they have is the fact that Lot has shown them the, shown hospitality. So that is a problem that they have simply because Lot has showed hospitality to the refugee. And so um, the second sin is the fact now we will deal with you worse than them. So, and the other sin that is important to remember is that the act of incest. Incest is also another sin that's important to remember because he's offered his daughters up instead of the men. Then they pressed hard against the man Lot and came near the door to break it down. So at this point in time, they're attempting to break into Lot's house. But the angels inside reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they struck blindness they struck with blindness the people at the door of the house, both great and all, so that they were unable to find the door. So then, in the angel's assessment, they said to Lot, "Have you anyone else here? Here, sons-in-law, sons, daughters, or anyone you have in the city? Bring them out of the place, for we're about to destroy this place, because the outcry against its people has become great before the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it." So notice before they notice in this particular text before they even mention the fact that they were going to destroy the house, God sent them in to investigate the matter. Show very, very clearly that there was a lack of hospitality going on here, and that there was the essence of rape going on that was happening to any refugee that came to the Sodom and Gomorrah. That's essentially what they were witnessing, and I will get into further details of the other sins that's been committed in this text. Now, as we can see from this text, Lot then went and gathered Lot went out and said to his sons-in-laws who were to marry his daughters, "Up, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city." But he seemed to his sons-in-laws to be jesting. When morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Get up, take your wife and your two daughters who are here, or else you will be consumed in the punishment of the city." But he lingered, so the men seized him and his wife and his two daughters by the hand. The Lord being to Lot, merciful to him, the Lord being merciful to them, and they brought him out and left him outside the city. When they brought them outside, they said, "Flee for your life, do not look back or stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the hills, or else you will be consumed." And Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lords, your servant has found favor with you, and you have shown me great kindness in saving my life. But I cannot flee to the hills, for I fear the disaster will overtake me and I die. Look, that city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one." So the scape notice that um, God directs them to a place where they can see safety and security. Safety and security. In no way, shape, or form, no, because Lot's household had shown hospitality. In this particular case, 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 the Lord being merciful or full, um, shows them not only a place where they can flee to, but also more importantly, um, he also names the place of Zor. Now when the refugees fled, or now when the refugees fled this particular place, God told them, "Don't look back. Um, don't look back, or they would be um, or they'd be destroyed with the city. But in Lot's uh, case, his wife behind him looked back, and she sadly became a pillar of salt. Abraham went early in the morning to the place where it stood before the Lord, and he looked down towards Sodom and Gomorrah and towards all the land of the plain, and saw the smoke of the land going up like the smoke of a furnace. So it was that when God destroyed the cities of the plain, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had settled. Lethal. So in the escape, in the escape, we can see very clearly. We can see very clearly in this particular case um, that because of the lack of hospitality that Sodom and Gomorrah that the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah had shown these people that people they had no other choice except to flee this particular city. And if we go back, remember the hermeneutical key here is that they were aliens, and it does in the context of defining them as aliens. Um, it doesn't specify the sexuality or gender. And likewise, in relation to the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, it does not also equally specify the sexuality or gender, um, of the people who intended to do harm to the refugees. Yes. Now, part number two, is in relation to the birth. So, in relation to the birth, it's often said that, and this is the part of the story that is not often focused on. Once the people have fled, um, what is often forgotten to be missed as part of Genesis 19 is that there is a birth or the start of a new life. And so here in the text, we can see that, well, it says that now Lot went up out of Thor and settled in the hills with his two daughters, for he was afraid to stay in Zor. So he lived in a cave with his two daughters. And the firstborn said to the younger, our father is old, and there's not a man on earth to come into us after the manner of all the world. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him. And so we may preserve the offspring through our father. So the sin being committed here is incest. So what gets me when whenever the first part of this text from Genesis 19 1 to 29 9, why is it the third part of this story, the act of incest, um, is not considered a sin as part of this story? It's a story because all too often all too often um, LGBTIQ people have been told over and over and again as a result of missing the hermeneutical key, that um, these are refugees. These are refugees that have fled. Why is it? Oh, why is it all too often? Or why is it all too often the fact that the angel made an investigation first before condemning the city? Why is that part of the story never included? Secondly, uh, 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 in terms of the etc., why is it all too often the reasons into why they fled had no other option except to flee that city? Um, why is that often not investigated? Because you're in a situation in which you're about to be killed, and your only option was to flee, you would flee. And why is it? Why is it from Genesis 19 30 to 38? Why is it the sin of incest as part of this story is also never taken into Count. Count. Now, the reason why the reason why this act is a sin is because they got their father essentially they'd gotten um, him drunk, and they'd had unconsented sex. So, and when a person is drunk, a person can't consent, can't give um, consent, to the act of sex, sex in any way, shape, or form. Like, or like, what if I kind of wonder if we flip this story around, what if Lot was a or what if Lot was a mother, and he had two sons, and they raped the mother. Would people notice the act of rape and incest that have been committed here, as a, here, here? Or what if the situation was reversed? Or what if the situation was reversed, um, in which the father got the daughters drunk, the father got the sons or daughters drunk, and had raped them. I kind of wonder, would anybody address that act of sin as of rape and incest that have been committed here? So, and that's the part that often frustrates me is because is when the bigots mistranslate this particular text. They're so focused. They're so focused on interpreting the Sodom and Gomorrah part that they forget to address the real sin, the sin of incest and rape and lack of hospitality that is being committed here, and that is the part that's um, not just myself, but many LGBTIQ people cannot for like who understands who understand the text of Genesis 19. For the life of me, we cannot understand, considering that the story of Sodom and Gomorrah is the name of two cities. Why is it the act of lack of hospitality, rape, and incest, as I've clearly demonstrated? Why is it that these sins are not addressed here instead of scapegoating LGBTIQ people? And as we can see from this particular text, uh, text, the act of incest was committed, and as a result of the act of incest that was committed here, um, both daughters became pregnant, and the firstborn bore a son and named him Moab, um, and the younger also bore a son and named him Benamam, and he is the ancestor of the Ammonites. So you've got you've got, as a result, you've got the Moabites and the Ammonites. Um, that have been born as a result of that sin. In front of the text, as we can see, now I will address uh, the real sin. Now, according to Dr. Reverend Mona West, the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah is this. In essence, they wanted to rape them in order to show their social and cultural dominance over them. In Ezekiel 16:49, Luke 17:28 to 29, and Jude 1:7, Sodom's sin is not identified as homosexuality. Rather, their sins were pride, failure to help the poor, and lack of hospitality to the refugees. Jeez, as well as the act of incest. All too often, these particular texts, I think, For too long, these particular texts have been out of context, in which all too often LGBTIQ people are made scapegoats for the sins of rape, rape, um, incest, um, lack of hospitality, etc., etc. Um, etc. And at no point in time do they ever bother to actually do what the angel did and investigate the matter first. First, nowhere in the text does it specify what the sexuality and gender here. The key part of this text, the hermeneutical key to understanding this particular test is Genesis 19:9, 9, 9, 9, in which it specifies as alien, which can be interpreted as refugee. G. G. All too often, these texts for too long, these texts have been used to condemn sexuality and gender of LGBTIQ people. For too long, these texts have been used to scapegoat LGBTIQ people. And I think that what is helpful from understanding the liberation hermeneutics of the text, when you understand the behind, within, and front of the text, you can see clearly that the real sin here is here, as I just mentioned, um, is that the sins were pride, failure to help the poor, and lack of hospitality to the refugee, and that no way, shape, or form this text does not specify sexuality or gender, and I think that um, what's helpful to understand this text. It's important to read the whole chapter. It's important to read the whole chapter and not just part of the story. Story, because all too often, when they interpret this particular text, they will often only interpret They'll only often only interpret, misquote part of the story or half of the story, um, and not tell the full story of what actually happened. Happened. The key factor that I think what is important that it's important to read. It's important to understand the historical context of what is going on in the situation first, seeking to investigate, and if there is no other alternative um, possible, um, then make an assessment. God deals with people, and God deals with people all the time. And the real sin in this particular text is in no way, shape, or form. This text it's not against the sexuality and gender of LGBTIQ people, and it's an important lesson for us as Christians today to remember um, to examine the real sin of the passages before first. In order to understand the full meaning of the text of these passages. Um, I know I was a little bit passionate about this particular text today, but essentially my biggest frustration is the misquoting of this particular text without understanding the full meaning. I hope my hope and prayer is that this has been helpful for those of you who um, you who wanted to have a further understanding of the this particular passage. Um, I realize it can be difficult if all you've been taught is this particular interpretation. I think it's important when you approach this particular text is to first and foremost most forget what you know. Forget what you know. Pretend. I think what is helpful is pretend you've never read this book. Pretend if you've got any negative or hateful interpretations of this particular text towards another group of people, regardless of whether that's the refugees or LGBTIQ people, you need to throw that in the bin. You need to throw that in the bin and read the text with fresh eyes, and examine behind the text, examine within the text, and examine in front of the text, and the text will be able to help you to bring full meaning in order to see that this is a particular text in which the whole chapter needs to be read in its context in order to have full meaning of the text. Because if you just read part of the text and go by that interpretation, it could be problematic in terms of it has the potential to be misinterpreted. Um, Anyway, thank you very much for tuning in. Please join us for 5 p.m. Sunday church. That's all for now. Please tune in next week for Genesis 20. That's all for now. Thank you very much. God bless. And see you next week. Bye.